In the beginning, the Bible tells us, God created the heavens and the earth. Then God's wind swept over the surface of the dark waters, and God said, "Let there be light." He separated the day from the night, and then he created life. And after all of this, God saw that it was good. And so it goes, the story of humanity, our story, begins. God created a man and a woman and gave them a perfect place to live, a garden called Eden.
Well, the garden is depicted as an orchard. God gives them this wonderful orchard, tells them they can eat all the fruit they want.
And they live in peace with the animals and with one another. It's an image of peace, completion, wholeness.
When we imagine the Garden of Eden, most of us think of a paradise like this, the ultimate Shangri-La, better than anything we could ever find on earth. But what does the Bible actually say about where it all began?
The biblical description is actually very short. It just says there are 4 rivers. Tigris and Euphrates are 2 of them, and then the other 2 are actually kind of unknown. That's the problem. If you can figure out where all 4 rivers are, then you've got the location.
And it is the tantalizing mention of these 2 remaining rivers that has fueled a never-ending search for the Garden of Eden. For centuries, people have looked everywhere from the depths of the Persian Gulf to rural Missouri and even the planet Mars.
I have a problem with the whole looking for the Garden of Eden, because how are you going to know when you found it? There's no signpost to it because writing hasn't been invented yet.
Which brings us back to the Bible story and the 2 rivers that we can locate today, the Tigris and the Euphrates in southern Iraq. They come together in an area known as the Fertile Crescent, where civilization first began. A perfect backdrop for the biblical beginning.
You've got a place that early man and early women could live in kind of idyllic harmony and with the food readily accessible and all that. And that's what we're really talking about, is an earthly paradise.
We're told that Adam and Eve have everything they could ever need, but in order to keep all this, they had to obey one rule.
God tells Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And God warned them that if they disobeyed, they would die. Snake comes along and says, once you've got access to the tree of wisdom, you can become like the gods. You can move up the ladder.
In a very human moment, we're told Eve couldn't resist the temptation to take more. So she took a bite and she passed the apple to Adam. It was the snack that changed history.
The man and the woman hide because they're afraid, because they know they've done something wrong.
When God says, "Did you eat?" it's Adam who points the finger at Eve. And not only at Eve, but at God. Because he says, "She gave me, and you gave her to me."
Now an angry God casts his creation out of paradise. And just like Adam, throughout the millennia, everyone has blamed Eve.
Women are blamed for lots of things that perhaps they need not. Adam could have said, "That fruit, I'm not going to eat it." But he took the fruit and he ate it.
Does that trouble you, the way it's been portrayed?
Of course it's troubling, but it reminds me that the Bible, for all that we say it's a divine document, it is written from a man's point of view.
Ironically, in the Muslim holy book, the Quran, there's more than enough blame to go around.
Both Adam and Eve are to blame equally for eating the forbidden fruit. So they're co-equal human beings, and I think that's been lost in today's narrative about Islam and Muslims, and I think that's something important to keep in mind.
But in the end, it didn't really matter whose fault it was. They both suffered the consequences of disobeying God. The first lesson of Genesis is cold and hard. For humans, sustaining life on this earth is not meant to be easy.
We have to go out into that cold, suffering world where we labor by the sweat of our brows and give forth our children in pain and have to suffer and die.
And we Christians believe that this is why Jesus came, to solve that problem, to pay the penalty for sin.
But maybe when Eve made the choice that Christians call original sin, it was something more. Maybe it was the first act of original thought.
Adam and Eve.
Free will?
Oh, absolutely, free will. That's a story of you can make a choice. That's the most horrible thing that faces a human being. You gotta choose.
On our journey, we met believers who say the Bible is the literal truth straight from the mouth of God.
Do you think that it happened?
And we met others, even those of faith, who believe that these are stories and have been passed down through the generations.
What brought you to Israel?
A record of a people's struggle with the world and their place in it. So how are we meant to read the book of creation?
This is a wonderful myth. A myth is more than history. It's telling you the meaning of history, the meaning of events.
God can communicate truth through different types of literature. It doesn't always have to be newspaper-style account of what happened.
For instance, was the world created in 7 days, or did it take millions of years of evolution? Both. Both.
So you're
of
saying
those
that
languages.
as a Catholic priest?
Yes, absolutely.
Science gives us insight into the how the universe works, how particles behave, but it gives zero insight into why. And I mean, why are we here? What's the meaning of it all? For some people, religion offers some degree of insight into those very important questions.
Important and difficult questions the Bible forces us to think about, like jealousy and rage, and why some people come to hate and harm each other. A lesson starkly taught in the story of the first children, the first siblings. Cain is a shepherd and Abel is a farmer. Both offer sacrifices to God, but God likes Abel's better.
This is about life as we know it, and life as we know it is not fair. We feel the pain of those whom God hasn't chosen.
In a fit of jealousy, Cain kills his brother Abel.
This was sort of the first example that we ever saw of murder, and the gravity with which God holds the taking of another human life.
And yet, with the passage of thousands of years, humankind is still at it. As surely as Cain killed Abel, the slaughter of innocents continues in the very place the Bible tells us this story was set, today's Syria, racked by the most brutal of wars. And in a sleepy town in Connecticut, the horrifying massacre of children in their elementary school.
How do we make sense of our torn world and our torn personalities, and the conflicts and the despair we fall into when we see suffering and injustice?
What I think the Bible does really well is help us ask really good questions. How could we do this better? If I were in this person's shoes, how would I have acted? If I'm judge and jury, what punishment would I assess? And God forbid, if I committed that crime, what would I want my peers to do to me?